6:50, we are starting the workshop session. And the first item for consideration is consideration of employee healthcare costs, increased distribution for program year 2020-2021. And Mr. Moore, you wrote us a memo on this particular issue, so I will cede the floor to you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, as well as members of City Council. And this is per direction as offered during the April 6th meeting when authorization was granted to proceed with continuing our relationship with Casa Permanente for program year 2020-2021. That is specifically from June 1st, 2020 to May 31st, 2021. And the outcome of that direction was, of course, to provide council with background information and analysis to help offer direction with respect to cost distribution of the respective price increase. So if I can call your attention to what is listed as packet page 3, there is a breakdown of the current structure as well as what would take effect June 1st, 2020. And then, of course, the following page are a summary of rates based on the various options that's being provided by Casa Permanente. The HMO option, point of service option, PPO option, and out of area option. But of course, Cigna, dental, and vision aren't any changes contemplated in that regard. So the remaining question is to address the case regarding the various options associated with Casa Permanente. Going back to packet page 3, we outline what the estimated annual employer increase will be. And quite frankly, there's a couple of different structures which tweak employee versus employer contributions vis-a-vis other rate considerations as well. So the column to the very right references a 0% increase for employees. However, the column to the left of it, biweekly comparison rate structure, June 1st, 2020, outlines the adjustments that similarly had taken a shape last year when this consideration was offered. So in that, we're talking about a spread of about $122,000 for different approaches in terms of whether or not the city of College Park will absorb the total cost increase or if there's a split contribution on part of employees going forward. I believe Chris Cook is available to visit with us. I did ask him to bring on board representatives from the RLP Corporation as our benefits broker to help address any specifics that might be outlined. Otherwise, it's pretty straightforward in this regard. Once again, this is simply an opportunity for Mayor and City Council to offer direction respectively as we anticipate initiating open enrollment within the next few weeks, if not less than that. At that time, I yield. But Chris and Steve Roberts from the RLP group, can you acknowledge your attendance this evening?
Not on, Terrence.
Okay, very well. And how about Steve Roberts?
He's not on.
Okay, so it's just you and me.
Correct.
Okay, very well. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be more than happy to entertain any specific questions or concerns you may have. Otherwise, this is where we are.
Okay, any questions?
Yes. Well, it's probably more of a comment than a question. If I look at a single employee under the HMO program in the middle column, they would pay $302.56 under the split program, under the existing program, and they would pay $305.86 under, I'm sorry, they pay $28.83 if there is if we absorb the cost, if the city absorbs the cost.
That's correct, the far right-hand column.
They would pay $32.13 if they participate in the increase to the same percentage that we have currently.
Correct.
So you're talking about a $4 increase, and I realize it's a 12% increase, but it's a $4 increase. But when you add up all those increases, I mean, you can look at the family and you can look at the different plans. My point is that we're saving the city the difference between $435,000 and $557,000. In other words, we're over $100,000.
$22,000.
Yeah. And you know, guys, over the years, we've been in great financial shape, and we've all felt good. And people have kind of, I think, looked at us as, well, you know, we're daddy or mommy, and we're in great shape, and hey, the city can afford it. Well, let me tell you, with the current situation, the city can't afford it, in my opinion. And I'm going to keep harping on this point. I think everybody, and I'll have more to say about that later in the other council meeting, but I think that everybody has to help out. And we can't help everybody. We just don't have the resources ourselves to do it. So I'm of the position that we should go with the current structure as opposed to what was proposed to absorb the cost. I'm not making a motion on that. It's a comment.
I'll have to chime in there as well, because I think the revenues are going to be way down, and we're going to have to make some hard decisions. I just don't see how revenue is going to come close. It'll be about 65-70%, I figure, this year, and next year's budget, I figure it's going to be even less. But I hope it doesn't. But I think we have to look at this very, very strongly. And I agree with Ambrose.
Councilman Taylor, Councilman Gay?
I also agree.
Councilman Taylor?
Just looking at we did a little bit of increase last year also. Like I said, everybody is going through a lot. I don't know. I think we're gonna have to absorb the cost. That's what I think.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the very last part of what you said.
I think the city we as the city gonna have to absorb the cost. That's what I think.
The full cost?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
So
I think, Councilman Taylor, the things that are going through my mind are what happened during the last situation, the city went through during the recession. And if it came to having all the employees absorb a small increase and being able to save the jobs of other employees later on, I would rather keep people employed, more people employed, and have everybody kind of share the pain. I don't know whether a motion's appropriate at this point, but I'd like to make a motion that we go forward with the current split.
I would ask that we move that to the regular session meeting, as we are.
I'll make the motion then. I'll be happy to.
Okay, we'll add it to the agenda then, and we can address it then. All right.
I want to ask Terrence, what was your recommendation for this?
Quite frankly, we provided a couple options. Essentially, what's being contemplated by your colleagues is essentially what occurred last year. The reason for the options to be presented is, of course, the spread of the cost savings difference. So we're looking at a savings, if you will, of $122,000. So it is a cost impact in that regard to the city of College Park. And again, there isn't any other considerations being made in terms of other opportunities. Although, as Councilman Clay put it, we've been able to make opportunities available for employees for a number of years, but given the respective concerns, they do make sense. So and keep in mind, Councilman Taylor and everyone, the current structure does involve the city of College Park taking on the lion's share of the overall cost increase. So the increase that may be experienced by individual employees is very minor in scope. So it's still a generous outcome, even still.
75%.
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions in regard to that? Mr. Moore, if you could just move consideration of that to the amending the regular session agenda.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Item number 2 is options and abilities to legally serve apartment complexes.
Yes, ma'am. So Chief Williford is in position to assist this particular discussion. I've offered an information letter report about this a couple months ago so as to have both the court system along with the College Park Police Department via its code enforcement section to more effectively and productively serve apartment complexes, because previously it had been quite challenging because the appropriate agent may not be there, just a management agent, et cetera. So this is an opportunity to legally enable more effective service to apartment complex to address issues like code violations, property issues and challenges, et cetera. So Chief Williford, along with Solicitor Al Dixon, I believe, are in position to address this matter further. So gentlemen, if you have any further questions or thoughts to add for this particular consideration, please feel free to do so.
I have a question. What about businesses as well? You said apartment complexes, but what about a business where it's owned by a conglomerate and you're trying to get in touch with somebody and you cannot get in touch with those people? Should we add businesses to that as well?
Quite possibly.
I don't know how many you would have.
Sure. I'd like to give both Solicitor Dixon and Chief Williford an opportunity to respond to that effect as well as part of their commentary. Gentlemen, please.
Okay.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Our challenge on the code enforcement side has simply been for apartment complexes and some businesses to actually find a registered agent to serve. For instance, every corporation is required to have a registered agent. That registered agent could be the actual owner of the corporation or the business. But in many cases, we're finding that they list a third-party registered agent, and those people are nowhere to be found. We're finding addresses that end up being UPS drop boxes and not an actual mailbox or not a physical address. So one of the things that Solicitor Dixon and I have discussed is moving forward requiring businesses to have a registered agent with a physical address within the metro Atlanta area. And I'll turn the rest over to Mr. Dixon.
All right, can you see me okay and hear me okay?
I can't see you, Mr. Dixon, but we can hear you. So
You can't hear me. Okay, well, that's good. The problem is, and especially with apartment complexes, is when code enforcement goes out and cites an apartment complex for a violation. They usually serve the leasing agent or a maintenance person or whoever is there in the office. And what happens is those people come to court and they have no real authority to act on behalf of the apartment complex or the owner of the apartment complex. And they really have no ability to pay a fine. And so what I was proposing essentially is that in order to get a business license in College Park or to renew a business license in College Park, that the business owner or the be required to supply the name, address, and phone number of someone, and preferably someone that lives in the city of College Park, to act on their behalf and to accept service of citations for code enforcement violations. And this would also include businesses as well as apartment complexes.
Can I add something to that? My immediate thought is that, so what keeps them from giving us a false phone number, email address, whatever? And I would argue that if we're going to do that, and I think it's a good idea, that we ought to make it verifiable. In other words, make them show a power bill, like we do our citizens for certain things, that show that they are physically at the address that they are giving, and maybe even verify by telephone that the telephone number is good. I'll just throw that out.
Yeah, a verification would be good. And then if they won't produce it or produce incorrect information, their business license needs to be withdrawn.
Absolutely. If they give us false information, you withdraw it.
That's a great idea.
I'd like to make a comment.
Councilman
But-
Gay, go ahead.
Well, I appreciate the effort that they put in trying to resolve a longstanding problem in my city of serving employees. But I'd like to ask the city attorney, can we require someone to use a registered agent at a certain address?
Well, they're already required to have a registered agent to the extent they're a corporate entity, so they're required to maintain a registered agent. However, as has been previously stated, a lot of times the registered agent is just the address is a PO box and so on and so forth. The issue then becomes, have they been served sufficiently such that we can move forward in municipal court with a citation? If we've served the registered agent, yes, we have. As a practical matter, the individual who receives it, this employee on the site, front desk manager or whomever, really isn't the person we want. They're not the person who's ultimately responsible, not legally responsible, and they greatly resent receiving the citation and having to come to court. If we instituted a new process whereby we created an ordinance which requires these apartment complex owners and managers to have, beyond what the state of Georgia requires in terms of having some perfunctory registered agent, but to have a real registered agent who lives in either Clayton County or Fulton County and that address was verifiable, I think we could certainly do that. There is some split in the authorities as to whether or not we can use the occupation tax code, in other words, the business license, as a regulatory measure. That's a revenue or tax generating power, not a regulatory power. So sometimes we get in trouble with that. But we could find some coercive remedy to gain compliance with having a physical person in Fulton or Clayton County to receive these matters and to come to court. I think we can do that, but it would take a little bit of creativity in how we accomplish that.
Any other questions? Mr. Denmark, would we need to amend our ordinances to include this?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, ma'am. We would have to do something.
All right. So would that be the consensus of the body to charge Mr. Denmark to engage in analysis about updating our ordinances to incorporate these requirements?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much, gentlemen. All right, moving on to item number 3, policy considerations to support recreation facility rentals. Ms. Johnson.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to briefly introduce this topic. This was something I did offer via an information letter report, probably going back about 2 months now. And on a light note, I'm looking forward to hopefully in the next few weeks being able to resume weekly information letter reports as we work to resuming normal operations when the timing is appropriate and makes sense to do so. But in any event, I've been working closely with Interim Director of Recreation and Cultural Arts, Michelle Johnson, to advance these considerations with respect to, number 1, the current state of affairs, and number 2, more importantly, what is happening in the marketplace with respect to municipalities and the fees and expenses charged for the utilization of recreation facilities. And so Michelle Johnson is in position to help address those thoughts and considerations. So I believe she has a couple of introductory comments to assist the consideration. And from there, we'll be able to entertain any specific concerns or thoughts you may have. Interim Director of Recreation and Cultural Arts, Michelle Johnson, are you there?
Yes, good evening, everybody. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
great. In overlooking the policies that we had in current contracts, so I wanted to try to get some consistency across the board for the rentals, and these were my recommendations. It was quickly into this position and looked at this, so there may be some updates that I need to do based on some of the information. In fact, talking to Councilman Clay today on some of these. So basically, we were trying to get the staff hour fee set across the board. at the $25, which was the difference with the pool rentals. And then consideration on looking at those park rentals, whether we want to charge or still do a refundable type of fee for the parks. So any questions regarding these, I'll be more than happy to address.
Well, Michelle, you answered my questions today. And is there any conclusion that you have? Well, you want me to go through my questions here? Or?
Sure, go right ahead. So maybe that there were.
All right, real quickly. I think we need an incentive for renters to clean up the pavilion. I've seen so many times pavilions that were left a mess. And so I don't think we need a mechanism to do that. I think a rental deposit is right. My comment to you today was, if there's an issue that we give, if we're going to give back the $20, but if they paid it by credit card, for example, so we don't get the full $20, then you charge a convenience fee and you let them register online. They pay a convenience fee, and everybody knows you don't get a convenience fee back. So if the pavilion is left in good shape, we give the $20 back, or whatever the price is that we set to it. So I'm of the position we do need a fee. It can be refundable, but we need something to encourage people, or at least to help pay for staff that's going to have to do some extra work.
Yeah, and that was my consideration, was if it was free, it was free. But if we wanted to charge something, let's make it consistent across the board with our rentals at the $25 an hour. And I actually put in 20 was my recommendation, but for everything else, it is $25 an hour for those other rentals, depending on those facilities. So it really is up to y'all to decide, but it is taking man time, accounting time, staff time to refund that money back. And we do have park rangers that look at those and oversee those parks that would check those facilities and make that recommendation if it would be refundable.
Ms. Johnson.
The other thing I had was on packet page 10, where we've got the issue of officers being required. And we worked that out. And basically, if it's an event that if it's part of a program that is sponsored by the recreation department or overseen by the department, it's not, you don't have an officer there. But if somebody rents out a pool, we've had problems in the past, we would have an officer there. If somebody rents out the basketball court, rents it out, and is going to have some kind of an event there, or maybe a philanthropic, I don't know, a benefit basketball game or something, then you would have an officer at that. Do we agree on that, Michelle?
Correct. If it was like, that was the question that you had regarding why it was up to the center supervisor to decide if a police officer was necessary. It would depend on who was renting the facility and what kind of event that was, based on our prior knowledge of what those events were. If it was a basketball program renting the facility for practice, we did not recommend a police officer for that. If it was a basketball games, then we certainly would consider or need of a police officer for those events.
And the other issues on the parks were, I thought we allowed staff to reserve pavilions, and we agreed on that today. So whatever policy or whatever write-up you put together on this, it should say, yeah, they're rentable by staff as well as rentable by a citizen in the community who lives in the community. And the other thing is that we passed an ordinance a while back that if we had over a certain number of people at an event in the park or what have you, they were required to have a police officer, for example. And it doesn't matter whether it's an employee or whether it's a citizen that lives in College Park. And I just want to make sure we don't forget that fact. And I don't remember the number. I think it was 100, but I couldn't be sure about that.
Yeah, I looked up, Shavela and I discussed that, and I looked at it's section 13-6, and it really talks about 10 people. And I'm not quite sure. I'll have to research that a little bit more. I know if it's anything above our regular outsider citizens, it goes through the city manager's office for approval and through us. So I did pull that and wanted to make sure there wasn't anything else that we needed to look at to abide by the ordinance for that, for those uses of the parks.
I think we may need to discuss that at some point. I don't know whether this is the right point as to what number of people we should have, because there's always the potential of having large gatherings that show up, and we need some kind of crowd control at those gatherings, whether they be at Badgett Field or at Barrett Park or any of the other parks or wherever that's on city property. And I think we have to be really careful on that we make sure we have adequate protection and then it gets paid for.
Yes, sir.
That's all I have.
Anyone else?
The only question I had was the same issue that Councilman Clay brought up about cleaning up. I think we need to make sure that they clean up, because in my experience, they're not, if they don't pay anything, they're not going to clean up.
Yeah,
So.
and that is true. So that was one of the reasons why the recommendations was either whether it was free or if we were going to charge. And I don't think it's too much to ask for a rental fee for that cleanup scenario to make sure that it's done. But that's absolutely at y'all's discretion to decide on what's best for the citizens.
The other thing, if we charge them for cleaning up, then they're going to just leave it a mess too. So.
And we do have park rangers during those 3 months to oversee those parks, but the rest of the year it's up to, you know, Parks and Grounds to go back through to clean those up. So, you know, it's something we might want to consider as far as the cleanup scenario. Madam Mayor, I think you had a question, didn't you, earlier?
I did. I wanted to know if we had any sense of if we are required to clean because someone fails to do their part, do we have any sense how much time that typically takes? And is the deposit reflective of that time that someone would spend doing it?
That, you know, we do hire park rangers. They only are 3 months out of the year. So Parks and Grounds does that weekly cleanup on a scenario. I'm not quite sure. You know, there are family reunions that rent out the park pavilions. And I'm sure there is typical more trash than it would be on a regular day. But that's what they're doing, is picking up the trash from there. But the park ranger on the new contracts, I have gotten with the attorneys to discuss. We've already got the contracts laid out based on what y'all's recommendations are to change those fees, you know, to go from there. So I'm not quite sure, you know, at hours worth at $25 an hour, I think would be some sort of a recommendation for those rentals for those facilities.
I mean, that makes it consistent with everything else.
And that's mine, is the consistency across the board is what I'd like to do for that. So like I said, my recommendation originally when I did this back in March was my second weekend, just trying to gather the information, but I would like to be consistent at what that hourly rate is for those staff fees.
And if someone's doing, I mean, if I would consider a family that is there for, say, a small birthday party kind of different than a family reunion that could get a lot bigger.
Right.
Is there any consideration in the park and pavilion rentals as to the size of the party that's expected?
You know, I know that they have to be a citizen. I know that they give that information when they do the rentals. I know Councilman Clay was concerned about the police scenario. We've kind of gone back and forth about wanting an off-duty police officer to oversee the parks, and just in future, maybe that's something we can consider. But park rangers would reach out to the police if there was an issue during that time period to handle that. So we could consider size based on that, absolutely, with the contracts that we're working on, if that helps somewhat. And I know Councilman Clay was talking about, based on the ordinance, what is that number? 100 people is a lot of people. They cannot rent out the whole park. They can only have a pavilion to do so. And those pavilions do have, you know, limitations on what the amount that it can serve.
I think we even put a limitation on how many pavilions somebody can rent.
Correct, and just, yes, correct.
That's all in an ordinance. We spent some time on it. I didn't.
Correct, and they cannot rent out the whole entire park for any one thing. It's still for use for the public.
All right. Any other questions?
Yeah, I think the park rangers there way more than 3 months. I think they there around 6 months. I think it's gonna be difficult for us to charge people $25 an hour. They'll just don't rent the pavilion, just come to the park and barbecue. So I think we're gonna cause a bigger problem if we try to make these people pay $25 an hour. I don't think.
Yeah,
I think it's $25 flat, Councilman Taylor, not $25 an hour.
Yeah, not
Oh,
for,
I heard.
And it's refundable. It's
Yeah.
refundable.
correct.
You get your money back if you don't mess up the pavilion.
Yes.
Yeah, I get that. Like I said, a lot of these people, especially Jamestown Park, there's a lot of people come back every year. The same people, normally gonna be the same people rent over and over and over. And a lot of them do a great job of cleaning up, you know. But I think we gotta find a better way to kind of, get with the citizens and figure out exactly what these guys want, and make it where it don't seem like, we want this money, you gotta do that. You know what I mean? Because people gonna do what they do either way. If they want to clean it up, they gonna clean it up. And if the park rangers, they're doing their job, most of the time, they have the people to clean up as they go. And I think most of the time when I was there, I've been in the park a lot, the police just come through. I never seen a off-duty police officer that get paid or come in and do the work. I think they just patrol through the area. You know what I mean? I don't know if we need an off-duty police officer. I really don't know. And then about the amount of people, when a person come down to rent the pavilion, they're not going to say that they got 200 people coming. They're just going to, I don't even think they even ask that question. And then so many people show up where you got people from College Park, just no people in College Park. You may think you have 25 or 30 people. You may end up with 100 people, you know what I mean, that may just come to this barbecue. So I think a lot of stuff that we thinking about doing, we're going to have no way of controlling it. You know what I mean? I think we got to kind of let it flow the way it flow and trust that the park rangers are doing their job. If they going to be the ones that know how many people going to come, who cleaned up, and the amount of people. If we set this stuff in stone to do it, I don't think we're going to obey the police this the right way. You know what I mean? Because we probably not going to even have park rangers this year.
Correct. It's possible based on the time limit that we're looking at. Correct.
The one thing I want,
normally come in April. They come right. They should be there now. You know what I mean?
April 1st. Correct. Yeah.
Like I say, with a hiring freeze, we definitely not going to get them in this time. This just, it's something we're going to have to do because of this year. We just got to trust that, these people going to do what they've been doing. They come out, they have a good time. They understand the rules, but we do got to find somebody, because we don't have park rangers, to get these parks back up, back up speed for the next day. You know what I mean?
If I may, ladies and gentlemen, Madam Mayor.
Yes, sir.
So these types of adjustments are really administrative in nature. We thought it would be appropriate to bring it to Mayor and City Council's attention to give you all an opportunity to offer consensus to proceed for the reasons outlined, the flat rates, et cetera. Again, Interim Director of Recreation and Cultural Arts was quite thorough in her analysis and review, spending time with me to help foster these recommendations. So technically we can make them happen administratively. Likewise, it would be appropriate to secure your consent at this time.
Gentlemen, is the consensus to move forward?
yes.
Yes, with me.
Yeah. I got one other thing. Michelle, I want to know, like, the people that, let's say our customers is already kind of locked in with the Brady Center and the Conley Center. How would this affect some of these people?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, Councilman Taylor. How are they what?
How would that affect some of the people? Like last year, we had a couple of people came down, and I guess they was doing their practice and training at different places in College Park. I'm not sure what they paid. I don't know the money amount, but we did give a guarantee to certain people. Like, okay, well, you can't do it this year, because I know one it was two different people that was doing things inside the Brady Center. So we redid the restroom and stuff like that, so they couldn't come back to the Brady Center. But we did tell them that this year they can go back. How would that affect them going in, for the future?
For the rentals or programming, Councilman Taylor?
I think they was programming. I know one of them was programming. It was a organization that had been doing something with the city in the summertime. They had been doing about 10 years. They've been all over different places in the city. And I'm just thinking, because we did give them a guarantee that they can come back, this year. Of course, they probably not gonna be able to come back now, what's going on. But what I'm saying, going forward, how would that affect these people? Would we still be able to keep these same programs that we had in College Park? Of course, add more programs, but would we be able to keep these same organizations that was with College Park already?
So you're talking about something separate than what we're discussing here on the rentals. This is for the parks and for rentals outside of our programming. Our programming, in retrospect to what you're discussing right there about Brady will probably not be open this summer again for construction. Phase 2, which y'all approved 2 weeks ago to proceed, is going to probably shut down Brady. So for that programming, and the person I think you're talking about, I have reached out to specifically and informed them about that. So those, I'm going to look at all those contracts. That's something separate. We'll look at those 75-25 contracts and again look at everybody and try to get them on the same type of consistency that we are trying to do here for the rentals. So all those contracts will be re-looked at and evaluated. I've actually already spoken with the attorney's office in trying to get that 75-25 contract across the board. Now, that any other considerations other than that would come to y'all for consideration.
Okay.
Did that answer your question? I think.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Councilman Gay, anything to add? You are on mute.
I don't have anything. Thank you.
Okay. Do you share the consensus of the body?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So it looks like we have about 3 minutes before the regular session begins. And so we can take a little bit of a break here, but we have finished the items on the workshop session and we will resume at 7:30.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Very good.
Hey, James, I'm going to leave this up and find the intermission page.